Okay, we will call our regular meeting of council to order.
Class.
What's that? And we will recognize that we're holding our meeting on the unceded traditional territories of the Sechot and Hoopachesit First Nations. Are there any late items identified by councillors? Okay, and any late items from the city clerk?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Would somebody like to move approval of our agenda?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
All in favor? Carried. And we have minutes from the special meeting of council held at 12:30 p.m. and the regular meeting of council held at 2 p.m. on December 9th, 2019. Would somebody like to move adoption of the minutes?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Second. And are there any questions or changes to the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. And that brings us to public input period, which is an opportunity for members of the public to address council on topics of relevance to city council. And we take a maximum of 4 speakers for no more than 3 minutes each. Maybe we'll say a minimum next time and see what happens. 4 people have to get up and speak. Come on forward. Back.
With Alberni Community Women's Service Society. So Mayor and Council, thank you so very much for letting us have this opportunity. I'm here on behalf of Alberni Community Women's Services Society, and Jeff Cook is a member of our board as well. Jeff is chair of our Coldest Night of the Year committee, and I just happen to have the latest in Coldest Night of the Year apparel to bring out for all of you. So the event takes place on the 22nd of February. We've changed our venue. We're leaving and returning. The Legion is the venue. And so the route will be changing to Victoria Quay, around Gertrude, along to Johnson, up by Tim's, and back around. That's sort of about the 2K route. It is a 2, a 5, and a, oh, you can hand these out, okay, please do. Sure. And one's for Tim, by the way. Okay. 2, 5, and a 10K walk, and it is for a family-friendly event. Some people like to bring their dogs and walk their dogs with them. It's a pledge base. Our goal this year is $30,000. I'm really excited to say that we're probably approaching the $20,000 mark already in funds raised. So hoo-hoo, we're doing really, really well. And please put your hats on because we're going to try and take a picture. Yeah, come on, put the hats on the thin head. So I'm trying to think if there's anything different. We're going to have an award for the best costumes, team costumes. I was just on the phone with the fire chief, encouraging them to get a team out. Friendly challenges between teams is always a lot of fun. And we're in conversation with our CMP to see if they can get a team out also. So we're very excited about the event this year, and we're really hopeful that the team will again, I say, enter a team and come out and have some fun with us. So thank you so much. And I want... Oh, how silly. We lost Jillian Trumper, a great member of the community, and this year's event is actually dedicated to Jillian Trumper, the memory of and in honor of her. And so we have her family is participating and involved with that. The Port Authority has come forward to help us through sponsorship, and so lots of people recognizing a great lady in the community also. Yeah, so hang on for the photo.
Maybe we should stand in front.
Technologically terrified.
This is not for public consumption.
It is so. You're going to be all over our Facebook after this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'm keeping mine on. I'm cold,
please do.
Madam Mayor.
Would you like to share my new heater? All right, Peter, come on forward.
Well, Happy New Year, everybody. It's nice to see you all. I hope you had a good one. Anyway, one of the reasons I'm here is simply this. I found out from the bylaw officers that we have a noisy muffler law, but they can't enforce it. And somebody mentioned that the cops had the rules on this one. Well, if the cops do nothing, then I think we should tell the police department that our bylaw officers are quite happy to go and enforce it and pull those vehicles off the road. It's time because it's getting worse instead of better. We have a neighbor that has 5, 6 cars in his yard, and he changes every one of them continuously to those big mufflers. It's unbelievable, the noise. Okay, so that is my main concern. Also, another thing would be the facility that helps people that have drugs on 3rd Avenue should be moved to a sanatorium away and out of town, because it's not helping anybody anything, and it's the sad part of it. And also, what most people may not know, the high school, and I have grandkids, is known well for big drug pushing, and they do nothing about it. That means the principal and the teachers. And that ought to be changed because they can do that. Okay? And the fire department, as an example, should not go out there and help stuff like that. The fire department is important for fires in houses and accidents. That's my belief. Thank you.
Thank you. Would any other members of the public like to speak during public input period? Okay, seeing none. We will move on to delegations, and we are excited to welcome our first delegation from ADSS Social Justice 12 class. Come on forward.
Hello, Mayor, Minions, and Council. We are Grace and Elliot from Ann Oswald Social Justice class at ADSS. We've been working on a project we think will help our community. Cigarette butts are a huge part of litter. They are consistently the most found piece of litter in community cleanups. According to Keep America Beautiful and the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, 1 in 3 cigarette butts end up as litter. That's 1.69 billion pounds of cigarette butts worldwide per year. Not only does litter look unappealing and degrade the view of the community, but it can be disastrous for the environment as well. A single cigarette butt can contaminate a whole liter of water. We believe this is an important issue, and we should be doing anything we can to help reduce cigarette waste.
There is more that can be done than simple cleanups and anti-littering messaging. However, cigarette waste recycling is possible, and preventative anti-litter messaging can be seen as negative or ineffective, whereas recycling is positive action. It leaves a stronger impression and has been proven to reduce litter more effectively.
An organization called TerraCycle has a cigarette recycling program that anyone can sign up for, and that has been implemented in many cities across North America. At TerraCycle's website, anyone can sign up for the program. Waste is collected and then shipped using a prepaid shipping label to TerraCycle for recycling. And for shipments of over 3 pounds, TerraCycle will credit you with $1 per pound, which can be donated to a nonprofit organization.
The environmental volunteer organization Surfriders Pacific Rim has set up 54 cigarette disposal canisters in Tofino and Ucluelet in 2017. The Tofino Ucluelet newspaper Westerly News reported that upon their first collection alone, they gathered 17,000 cigarette butts that could have otherwise landed on the sidewalk or in planters.
The cigarette disposal canisters on TerraCycle's website can be purchased for $100 Canadian each, but different locations have used different receptacles. The ones in Tofino and Ucluelet are not the ones listed on their website. When they've collected enough waste, you can download a prepaid UPS label and call UPS to have it picked up the following day. It is shipped to TerraCycle's main warehouse in the south of Ontario. Depending on volume and demand, they then recycle the materials in either Canada or the US. The tobacco and paper are used for non-food composting, and the filter is turned into plastic used for ashtrays, shipping pallets, or plastic lumber.
We think it would be a great idea for the city to reach out to Surfriders Pacific Rim or TerraCycle directly and get involved with this program. Cigarette disposal canisters can be placed at public venues around the town and could greatly improve the local environment and public perception of these venues. Thanks for your time.
Are there any questions?
Just so I'm clear, you mentioned Tofino and Ucluelet and the success they've had. Are these canisters from this same TetraCycle, or are they from a different company?
I'm not sure where the canisters are from. They're not the same ones listed on TerraCycle's website, but the recycling process, they do ship them off to TerraCycle. They're in partnership with.
So they're shipped to Southern Ontario
The
then?
materials are shipped, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
That's great. Any other questions from council? Councillor Haggard.
Not a question, just a comment. I really want to thank you for taking this on. I think this is very important. And as we try and move towards a more green community, I think this should be one of our priorities. So thanks very much for doing this.
Thanks.
Councillor Paulson.
So, is there a spot in Port Alberni that we need to have this tomorrow that you can think of?
Skate park.
The skate park,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, well, that's a good starting point.
Parks like Roger Creek Park and Harbor Key, I think, Victoria Key as well, I think could benefit from it.
Good for you, you've given
That's
some
great.
thought to it, good, thank you.
Yeah, just wanted to mention, we are also sending some materials to the Chamber of Commerce to try to get businesses interested, because businesses can buy these individually and have them in front of their storefront.
That's great. And I think a good step for us would be to pass this over to our Parks and Rec department, and they could maybe make some recommendations on if this would work for us and where we could put them. Number in Tofino being 54 is a lot. So I mean, I guess there has to be a lot. They have to be everywhere to make the program work and work well and have an impact. So yeah, that's great, and nice to know that they can be purchased so ineffectively. So thanks so much for the work you guys have done. And do we need a motion to pass this to Parks and Rec? Okay, wonderful. So Parks and Rec will take this on and see if we can get some of these into our community. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now get back to school.
Okay, moving on to unfinished business. We have a report from the Manager of Planning on relocation and recycled homes.
There we go. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and Council. So at the November 25th Council meeting, Council received correspondence requesting that the City consider changing the building bylaw standards for the relocation of recycled buildings. It was suggested that the City's building bylaw, as it relates to the requirement that move structures meet the BC Building Code, does not reflect the practice of other municipalities. Since then, staff have reviewed the building bylaws of 7 other nearby jurisdictions, and a summary of that information is provided in the written report. Based on the review, it appears that the City of Port Alberni's building bylaw and relocation moving requirements are consistent with other jurisdictions and aim to promote public safety and protect the economic, social, and environmental health of the city. So as such, staff do not recommend making changes to the bylaw at this time. However, if council does wish to proceed with amending the building bylaw, we would request that we're able to provide further analysis.
Okay, thank you. Council, are there questions? Councillor Corbeil.
I still think this is an important topic if we can divert buildings from going into landfills. And, you know, being a forest industry community, and there's a real emphasis on using forest products versus other products that are much worse for the environment than wood. And wood is fine as long as it's not burnt or in the process of decomposing. We should be trying to utilize wood as much as possible. Now, I'm not 100% sure what is meant by, for example, in the background information, it talks about a professional okaying the building as being safe. And I know in Campbell River, what they mean by safe is structurally competent, plumbing, electrical, gas, heating, things like that. I think our bylaw just simply says building code. It doesn't break it down. And I'm not sure if the two are compatible, and maybe you could answer that. Is building code the same as structurally safe, plumbing safe, electrical safe? And if not, maybe it should be broken down.
Yeah, so typically the way a registered professional would determine what is safe is by using the BC Building Code. And it's possible that maybe other municipalities have developed alternative standards, but we do not believe that to be the case.
Okay, I'm just, I kind of would like more time on this, just in case there is a difference between what, and I would look at what Campbell River does, because they actually do break it down into about 5 or 6 categories. You know, structurally being the number one, which, you know, obviously if a building doesn't meet structural integrity, it should not be allowed to be put anywhere near the community. But, you know, I think what we're suggesting right now prohibits the opportunity to ever move a home from Port Alberni, from outside Port Alberni into Port Alberni, unless it was built, you know, in the last 20 years or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the requirement, it does enable buildings to be moved to the community, but they have to meet the building code. In Parksville, for example, they actually have a requirement in their building bylaw that doesn't allow any external buildings, so buildings outside of the city of Parksville, to be moved into the city. We don't have that in place. So really it's just the standard at which we're allowing buildings to be moved into the community.
Okay.
Yeah, I think my thoughts are more in line with Councillor Corbeil's as well. I read through this, and I mean, obviously this came to us because somebody said to us that our program is more prohibitive than other communities. And reading through, I'm really looking for, well, where is it more prohibitive than other communities? And what I see is Regional District of Nanaimo, you know, use a registered professional to determine safety. I'd like more information on on does that mean bring it up 100% to code? Because that's what our policy is, 100% code. I think that does make it really prohibitive in ever probably moving a home. And so I'm just, you know, wondering, are Campbell River and Nanaimo Regional District allowing a more flexible policy like we're being told, or are they really being enforced on the same level as us? So I actually really liked the Parksville piece of their program that says you can't bring an old home in. The reason that I'm attracted to this policy, or, you know, to looking for ways to make this policy used more, is that we have the highest waste per capita on the island, and I think we need to be looking at real ways to reduce that, and demolishing houses is a huge piece of amount of waste. And I think this is an opportunity for us to make sure that we're not bringing somebody else's waste in to our community. But if there is a house in Port Alberni that's going to be demolished so that a new house can be built that is, you know, safe still, that does meet a safety standard, then I think we should be looking at ways to accommodate that, not only for the waste piece of it, but also because housing is getting increasingly expensive and unaffordable for young people, and this is a way to probably bridge that gap for some younger people to be able to get into a house more affordably. So I'm not ready to say make no changes. I would like a little bit more information, I think, on the specifics of how we are differing from other communities. Councillor Washington?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have to agree, because if I had a house in, say, Campbell River and it's inspected as good there, and then I move it to Port Alberni and then put it on the foundation, and then the building inspector here says, nope, you can't do that.
Yeah.
I mean, we have to have some kind of flow with the whole thing to make it more friendly.
Yeah, for sure. Councillor Poon?
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I agree with all that's being said. And yeah.
Okay. So, where are we here? I think we probably could receive the report and ask for further information on, I mean, I think specifically Campbell River and Nanaimo, more of a breakdown of what those communities are doing, because those are the ones that seem like they might be more lenient than requiring houses to be brought up 100% to code, to current code. Would that be the direction council wants to go generally? Okay, I'll make a motion. Yeah, I'll make a motion that we send this back for further information on the Nanaimo and Campbell River programs. Okay. Okay. Any discussion?
Yeah, just a quick discussion on on the recycling and dismantling of homes. I think that we will see in the next few years legislation that will mandate how homes are demolished. And I don't know if anybody saw the news article where the company called the Unbuilders has now opened on Vancouver Island, and they're kind of a leading edge company in recycling homes and buildings. And the need for something to be referred to legislation with regards to the landfill, I think, is coming.
Yeah. And
I think that legislation will severely restrict. You can't just knock it down and take it out to the landfill anymore. So if you get a chance, read about the Unbuilders, just Google them, and it's a pretty neat process. They can issue tax receipts to home builders for the materials that are being removed, which makes it quite affordable. And I think they use Habitat for Humanity as their charity. So
very interesting.
I don't know how often moving of a building is an issue in Port Alberni. I guess we want to take care of it, but the report was good enough for me, but I'll go with council's will.
There might be something that we could encourage more of, houses being moved instead of demolished when it does make sense. Okay, on the motion, all in favor? Carried.
Can I ask for, as requested in the report, just clarification on the level of priority of the project, just with a number of other ongoing projects, if this is something that should be bumped ahead, or how should it fit into the queue?
Councillor Poon?
I think the priority should be low on this. I mean, we rarely get these kind of projects, right?
I think it's difficult to say that without a list of projects that it would be ahead or behind. I think staff has to use their discretion on that unless we have a list of projects in front of us. Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, on to staff reports. Item 1, accounts. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move the certification of the Acting Director of Finance dated January 13, 2020 be received and checks numbered 145112 to 145296 inclusive, and payments of accounts totaling $3,746,272.19 be approved.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Okay, any comments? All in favor? Carried. And item 2 from the Director of Engineering and Public Works, the Public Works Facility Assessment Report.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and Council. So you have in front of you a report on a report. So the report from McGill and Associates was a report commissioned by the city quite some time ago, actually back in 2018, and we just received it at the end of 2019. So as a result of the exercise Coastal Response, which was a province-wide scale emergency exercise in 2016, the debrief out of that recommended that the city of Port Alberni undertake a review of the risk from earthquake and tsunami to the city's public works facility on 6th Avenue. So this is the result of that. Basically, the report states that the public works facility in its current location is not able to fulfill its emergency operations function in the event of a major earthquake and or tsunami. And the existing buildings at that site are not built to withstand seismic forces or inundation. There's some other issues identified, obviously not as great as those two. The report identifies retrofitting the existing buildings as a possibility to withstand earthquake, at the cost of about $800,000 to $1 million. But really, and it says in the case of a tsunami, there's nothing you can do to help that facility. So at the end they basically conclude that due to the high cost of retrofitting relatively old buildings to bring them up to post-disaster levels of the current building code, and the inherent vulnerability of the existing low-lying site to tsunami risk, the best mitigation approach is to relocate the public works facility site to a new location outside the tsunami inundation zone. So McGill has identified and evaluated a number of sites in and around the community. Again, not at at too deep a level on those. The most likely site that they recommend is property in or around the existing fall fair grounds. They also say that we'll need extensive planning, budgeting, and public engagement to move forward on that. So staff recommend that council put some money in the 5-year plan. $50,000 would get us some engineering, probably some preliminary designs, and some better ideas of what the actual cost of that might be. I mean, there are some numbers in the report. It'll be a costly endeavor, obviously, but we recommend that staff or that the process start anyway.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions from council? Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a question to our CAO. Where would we come up with that $50,000?
Madam Mayor, Council, we haven't identified that in this report, and if you direct us to add $50,000 to the draft financial plan at our next meeting on January 20th, we'll have that source of revenue identified, be it from general or reserve.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, if I could just follow up on that. What we're asking, what the Director of Engineering is asking is that you direct staff to put $50,000 in the draft financial plan for your consideration of the budget process, not for approval today.
Okay, great. Did you have a follow-up question, Councillor Washington?
Far-fetched question, but the present work site was built in 1966. Do you know if that ground got wet in 1964?
It didn't, to my knowledge.
Okay.
Okay. So seeing no other questions, Councillor Washington, would you like to read the motion we have there?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The council directs staff to add $50,000 to the 2020-2014 draft 5-year financial plan for the purposes of undertaking the next steps in exploring relocation of the city's public work facility, namely further exploration of suitable sites, facility preliminary designs, and a budget development work as outlined in the report prepared by McGill and Associates Engineering Limited titled Public Works Facility Assessment dated December 2019.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Okay, seeing no comments, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, and moving on to item 3 from the Acting Director of Finance, the Audit Committee report. Are there any questions or comments on the Audit Committee report? Okay, I have one, and I'm just looking for the right page again. So on the mayor and council expenses, I saw that there was a new one put forward with some corrections made, but there still is not, for our FCM trip, there's still no flights for Councillor Poon. And so I'm wondering if my amount is double. It included my flights and her flights.
Madam Mayor, I'll have to maybe dig up the actual invoice to see if I can find that it's a duplication.
Okay.
Because I did notice that your amount looked quite big, but it all did come under one when we recorded the expense. So what I can do is I can go and dig up the invoices and retrace and see if I need to reallocate that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's my only question.
Okay.
I think everything else looks good. Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
See you.
Madam Mayor, Council, staff have been noticing
in that the current audit committee is needing more support than I've seen previous audit committees. And so we've been working on how we might better support that committee. And I think the first step is to identify what is the mandate of the audit committee, and then how do we serve council? How does staff serve that committee so they can fulfill their mandate? Turns out we don't have a written mandate for the audit committee. So I'd request that council consider developing a written mandate for the audit committee, and then terms of reference, if you like. And then with that in hand, we can determine what's the best way to, then the audit committee members and future committee members will know what their mandate is, and we'll be able to target better how we fulfill supporting that. Does that make sense?
Yep, I think that's a great idea. Okay. I've never sat on the audit committee personally, but in reading, the types of questions and stuff, I've wondered in the past, just more specifically where the focus should be. So I think that's a great idea. Councillor Washington, you've been chair of the audit committee for a long time. Would you like to make that motion, or do you have any comments on that?
Actually, I'm embarrassed that we don't have a mandate. I sat on the committee before, and when I became chair, I just followed suit of what the council of the past was doing. I do admit that this new committee does ask a lot of check registry questions, but I mean, a lot of those could be taken care of before the meeting, because we do get a package ahead of the meeting rather than bogged down. Because I mean, some of this stuff is just, if you Google the name, you'll find it'll make sense why the check was written. So yeah, no, I would like to see us streamline it and let's get a mandate. Thank you.
That's great.
Madam Mayor, I just want to be really clear. I'm not suggesting that the audit committee should not ask those questions, but it has become noticeable, I guess, that when they ask questions, we don't have those answers in the moment, and we don't have staff in the room to give the answers in the moment because we have to go back and do the research. And then when this report hits this meeting a month later, there's a disconnect. And so when we started to look at how can we better serve the audit committee in the moment and through them council, then we realized there isn't actually terms of reference. So we think that would be the starting point. And yeah, so it's in no way saying the audit committee shouldn't be doing what they're doing. There's a reason why we have a council level oversight over the city's finances. So we just need to all understand what that is and how to get there.
Okay. I think that's great. Councillor Haggard?
Would it be more timely if the audit committee could send their questions into finance prior to the audit committee meeting, so we'll have answers at the meeting?
That's one solution the audit committee did discuss, because they had this discussion. And we've also discussed, could we in real time have access to the database? So there's a staff member there pulling data out of the database, right? So we're actually exploring that option as well right now. So yeah, but all those things led us to, well, what is the role? What are we supposed to be doing there?
Councillor Corbeil?
Another option I think we discussed was the feasibility of having another column. So for example, if it said ABC Engineering, it could say sewer lagoon. That would probably take away 90% of our questions. A lot of times you'll see something that you have no idea what that could possibly be for, but it would be very simple for somebody to input, parks and rec, maintenance, sewer lagoon, etc.
Okay, that's great. All right.
So
Councillor Washington, was that a motion to receive the audit committee report and start the process of a terms of reference? Is there a seconder? Okay. All in favor? Carried. Item 4 from the Director of Parks, Recreation and Heritage is the McLean Mill Society. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So throughout recent years, the McLean Mill Society has indicated difficulty in meeting their obligation within the operation and management agreement for the McLean Mill National Historic Site. As a result, Council in 2019 directed city staff to undertake a request for proposal RFP process in an effort to find a new suitable operator. The RFP process closed in the fall of 2019, and while city staff continue to work on securing an operator for the site and in an effort to avoid additional burden on the McLean Mill Society, staff are proposing that the city move forward with an early termination of the operation and management agreement between the city and the McLean Mill Society, and that the city assume responsibility of the operation of the site until such time a new operator is named.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from council on this? Councillor Heckert?
Not a question, but a comment. If this motion is approved, I would like to make sure that we do send a letter thanking the McLean Mill Society for all their volunteer hours. They were a very passionate group of people, and that should be dismissed just because they couldn't meet the obligations and our expectations.
Absolutely. Okay. Councillor Haggard, would you like to read that motion?
I move that Council for the City of Port Alberni terminate the operation and management agreement of the McLean Mill National Historic Site between the City of Port Alberni and the McLean Mill Society effective December 31st, 2019, and further that city staff be responsible for operation of the entire site until such time as a new operator is named.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Any further comments? All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. And item 5 from the Deputy City Clerk, we have convention attendance. So a report dated January 3rd, 2020, requesting council authorize the attendance of Mayor Minions and Councillor Corbeil at the Truck Loggers Association Convention and Trade Show in Vancouver. Are there any questions on this? Okay. Councillor Corbeil, would you like to read this motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It gives me great honor to read out that the council authorize Mayor Minions and Councillor Corbeil to attend the Truck Loggers Association Convention and Trade Show taking place on January 15th, 16th, 17th, 2020 in Vancouver, BC, with authorization to include reimbursement of expenses incurred as per city policy number P6, travel expense policy.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Second. And council, just for clarity, we do usually send the mayor and one councillor to this, and I thought Councillor Corbeil would be appropriate because he's the community forest liaison. Okay. All in favor? Carried. And item 6 from the Manager of Planning, short-term rental research project.
Hello again. So I am here along with Seamus McConville, who is a Master's of Community Planning student at VIU, to provide some information about short-term rental regulations and current policy issues. This information can be used by council to hopefully direct staff on how to proceed with short-term rental accommodations in Port Alberni. So just as a little bit of a backgrounder, back in January of 2019, so a year ago, the former manager of bylaw services brought to council various changes to the business license bylaw number 4980. Some of those proposed changes involved introducing definitions and a licensing scheme for short-term rentals. Council supported making those changes to the business license bylaw and directed staff to engage the public on those proposed changes. However, that project was temporarily put on hold, and the public has not yet been engaged on the business license bylaw changes. Primarily, this happened because the city does not have zoning in place to permit short-term rentals currently, and zoning changes need to be introduced in order to allow for short-term rentals to be permitted within the city. So when the planning department was invited to participate in Vancouver Island University's Master of Community Planning internship program, the short-term rental project seemed like an obvious choice to get it moving forward and was selected as a means of enabling those changes to come forward. Seamus's project has focused on collecting various housing and tourism statistics, conducting a policy analysis, and providing an analysis of other municipal regulations regarding short-term rentals and vacation accommodations. So his research is summarized in a report that's attached, and he is here today. So I'd like to invite him up to provide a summary of his research project, and then I'll come back up and talk about hopefully next steps.
Thank you, Caitlin, and good afternoon, Madam Mayor and Council. My name is Seamus McConville, and as mentioned, I'm a Master of Community Planning student at Vancouver Island University in Nanaimo, and I'm here today to present to you on my findings from my research that I conducted with Caitlin over the last 4 months. So as mentioned, the project was done as part of our new internship program inside the Master of Community Planning program. So all myself and about 19 other of my classmates were paired with many different municipalities and organizations on Vancouver Island to conduct a project which was defined by each community. And so, of course, I was paired with Caitlin and the City of Port Alberni to conduct research around short-term rental policy. And the ultimate goal of this project was to create a report that'll help influence and inform future short-term bylaw regulations in the City of Port Alberni. So just as a primer, short-term rentals, or more commonly known as Airbnb, VRBO, Home Away, is a different type of accommodation for travelers and visitors to a community. Basically, a homeowner offers space in their home to rental for visitors to their community. There's many different styles of an Airbnb or short-term rental, ranging from a hostel type operation where you have multiple beds to a room, an entire dwelling unit, so an entire house, or a private room in a dwelling, very similar to a traditional bed and breakfast. Usually the most common ones that are seen are split between an entire house rental or a single private room inside a house, again, much like a traditional bed and breakfast. They are a blessing and a curse. They're good for homeowners looking to make a little bit of extra income or hold a house down for an investment property. Tourists like them since they can act as a more authentic experience to a community and offer amenities that a traditional hotel may not be able to offer them. They, of course, do come with some cons, them specifically being impacts to a neighborhood, especially when a short-term rental acts like a traditional hotel, and they can also remove housing stock in a community that could be used for rentals to residents looking for a place to stay. Now in Port Alberni today, Port Alberni, as mentioned by Caitlin, has taken some work in order to navigate the short-term rental situation in the community. There has been some bylaw drafted earlier in 2019 with some requirements of short-term rental operators to have specific licensing, as well as a local contact person available at all times, mainly to mitigate community impact. As you can see on the graph here, if that's the laser pointer. Oh, cool. Yeah, so as you can see on the graph here, I pulled all this data from a website called AirDNA, and throughout the City of Port Alberni, there's no specific place where Airbnbs are concentrated. They seem to be scattered all over the community. Now, considering this, the city has had many current bed and breakfast operators approaching the city about appropriate licensing in order to use platforms such as Airbnb and equivalent sites to market their bed and breakfast. Anecdotally, there have been about 4 bylaw complaints at short-term rental sites in Port Alberni in 2019, and today we actually see about 35 entire home rentals within the city, with a 75% occupancy rate throughout the year. There are peaks and valleys to occupancy, of course. In August of 2019, there was a 90% occupancy rate for all short-term rentals in the community, and a low of 42% in October of 2019. It's also, as you may be aware, Port Alberni has a very low rental vacancy rate of 0.7, which is lower than the national average of 2.5%. It's often cited as a reason to regulate short-term rentals in other communities, especially those entire house rentals. There's also some reports in Port Alberni that secondary suites are being used as short-term rentals, which of course can also take away from stock that could be used for rental accommodation. Overall, my key findings from my research saw that a lot of communities had similar concerns: traffic, guest behavior, and housing availability, considering landowners may choose to do a short-term rental instead of renting it out to a long-term tenant. While there are very similar concerns, communities often took different approaches to the regulation of short-term rentals, and we'll look at that in the 2 case studies I prepared for you today. The reason for this is that the fact it was based in community consultation, with surveys going out to the general public as well as short-term rental operators in order to understand their concerns and needs when it came to the issue at hand. Now, the first case study I'll present to you today is for Powell River. They did a very comprehensive overhaul of short-term rental bylaws and have very similar context to Port Alberni. And much like Port Alberni, they have a very low rental vacancy rate of about 0.5%. Powell River chose to regulate with sweeping measures. They created 2 specific license classes, one for a traditional bed and breakfast operator who may only share an extra room within their dwelling unit, and created another license for those who chose to rent out an entire house. There is an unlimited amount of bed and breakfast style licenses in Powell River, but a cap of 10 vacation rentals. So an entire house rental, there's a cap of 10 for the entire city. They also put general restrictions on short-term rentals. No more than 8 people per short-term rental, with a maximum cap of 30 days per stay. According to planning staff, these restrictions have had impact on the short-term rental situation, with at least 10 short-term rentals taken off the market, although the caveat being that this may be a seasonal reduction and longer study on that phenomenon might be needed. Through the public consultation process, they discovered that the key concerns were housing affordability, neighborhood impact, as well as fairness to existing hotel operators who raise concerns that Airbnb and short-term rental operations may not be subject to the same levels of scrutiny and policy and regulation that a traditional hotel is up for. Now, my second case study is Nelson, and they took a much more microed approach to regulation of short-term rentals in the community. Here, they didn't have the same two-tiered licensing situation, instead of focusing on regulation block by block. Therefore, there was a hard cap of 3 vacation rentals per block, no matter if it's a bed and breakfast style short-term rental or a whole house rental. Nelson also created specific zoning for a short-term rental to operate out of. Therefore, to qualify to operate the short-term rental, you need to have the appropriate zone and be only one of 3 on the block. They also undertook this work in conjunction with the Regional District of Central Kootenay, the regional district for that area. And that way there's actually uniformity between the City of Nelson's short-term rental bylaw and the bylaws that were in effect for the unincorporated areas around the city. And once more, the issues of affordability and community impact were prominent in the community discussion. So in conclusion, communities are all looking to regulate short-term rental operations more closely, as before the previous status quo was treating them much like a traditional bed and breakfast. Now, while this might be apt for a private room style short-term rental, this appeared to not be as adequate for full dwelling unit rentals. Short-term rentals and communities have similar issues and concerns, but not similar approaches. They must be determined with an eye towards community context and needs. And considering Port Alberni's context, entire house rentals may prove to be more of a challenge when considering the state of housing stock within the community, and if the tourism industry is going to continue to grow in a region, then these styles of short-term rentals may prove to be a challenge. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Seamus. So with this research in hand, staff are requesting that hopefully council can provide some direction on how to proceed. The planning department has outlined a recommended timeline and next steps within the report. And this would hopefully enable us a path forward for introducing short-term regulation zoning bylaw provisions. This project, as proposed, would consist of 3 phases. So the first phase would focus on public engagement and actually developing the zoning bylaw amendments. The second phase would then focus on a public awareness campaign to actually, once changes were introduced by council, to then raise an understanding, a level of understanding in the community. And then the final phase would focus on hopefully introducing some sort of taxation scheme to go along with that. And then finally, there was one other thing that we were hoping to kind of bring to council's attention. So since there are several housing related policy issues that are currently being reviewed by staff concurrently, we'd like to bring to council's attention the idea of developing a housing strategy and action plan. A housing strategy and action plan could consider these policies in relation to one another and consider things such as rental vacancy and housing affordability. The strategy could provide the city with a framework and recommendations that would respond to the housing needs unique to Port Alberni. Additional funds would probably be required to hire a contractor or part-time staff person to oversee the implementation of that project. So that's the summary, and we're open to any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Are there questions from council? Councillor Haggard.
This may have been in the report, maybe I just didn't see it, but other communities, did you find that, did the community charge short-term rental owners a business license fee? And if they did, were they charged commercial rates on their taxes?
Sure. Do you want to come up and speak to that? Yeah, sure.
Yes,
of course.
yes, Councillor. So from that, in Powell River, for example, I know that they actually, when it came to those separate business licenses, the short-term rentals that were more like your traditional bed and breakfast, they had a specific licensing fee, and I think it was about $100 per year. Okay. And for someone who was renting out for a full short-term rental, it was about $1,000 a year. So that way there's like a differentiation. Mm-hmm. So if you're just renting a room out as a traditional bed and breakfast mm-hmm. operator, it was a little bit less of a cost. Mm-hmm. But if someone was renting out the whole thing, then there was a bit more of a cost. Mm-hmm. As for the tax rate, I didn't see anything in my travels about that portion of it, but there were definitely different costs for a different style of business license.
Yeah, something else. I was about a year and a half ago, was at a housing workshop, and part of the problem in Port Alberni is many investment properties that were used for rentals, when the house prices started really increased a couple years ago, then a lot of these owners of these rental properties cashed out and got out of the market. So that really started the squeeze on our rental properties in this community. So I just want to make sure that short-term rentals aren't the only issue that we're to blame for our low vacancy rate in the community.
No, of course.
Thank you.
Sure. Other questions? Okay. Seeing no other questions, how would council like to move forward? I'm just looking back at the work that we have done on short-term rentals to refresh, because one of the things that was suggested was that whole houses might not be the right way to go in Port Alberni. And I think what we have done 2 readings of so far, the bylaw says that there has to be a permanent resident on site, meaning that it could only be a suite or bedrooms, couldn't be a whole house for rent. And there's some other regulations in here as well. I personally don't really want to throw out what we've already done. I think there's, we had good discussion when we did pass these first 2 readings last year in January of the regulations that we put forward for short-term rentals. And I'm not sure I'm ready to go through a whole process and kind of restart on public engagement when we've already gone through a bit of a process. It might be worth council refreshing what we passed first 2 readings of and then coming back to this. So taking a look at that bylaw that was given 2 readings and getting a sense from that if that's still how we want to proceed or if we want to go through a public process.
Can I just,
Sure.
So just to clarify, what was brought forward by the manager of bylaw services was changes to the business license bylaw, not changes to the zoning bylaw.
For sure.
Yeah.
So I think what I was expecting as the next step would be proposed zoning. So in which zones would we expect this? So I think our options today are we could just make a request for you to bring back proposed zoning. We could go through the proposal that you've put together and we could go through that process, or we might want to start with reviewing what we have already started so that we can all refresh and see if that's still the path we feel comfortable with, and if not, we might want to go through the public process. How does council feel about those options? Councillor Poon.
Thank you. I'd like to see us go towards looking at the zoning now. I think that some of the phases that you've outlined are maybe a bit long, and I think we should. I think hopefully we could cut it down a bit with looking at zoning now.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay. Does council remember what we passed in January of last year? Okay. So I think that we should move forward by first bringing that back to our next council meeting, because I think it's important for all of council to remember what we passed last year and have a conversation about if that's still the direction we want to go. If it is, I think we could then ask our planner to bring forward proposed zoning. If it's not, and we think there might be more to the issue and we want to start a more, a larger community process on it, if we're not happy with what we have passed, then we could give that direction at that point. So just so that everyone is comfortable with what we've done to date, let's start with just putting even, those first 2 readings that were passed, putting that on our agenda. We don't need a full report on it or anything like that, just as an opportunity for us to make sure we remember the details in there and decide if that's how we want to move forward or not. Okay.
I do have a copy of it here. I only have 1 copy, so it probably wouldn't be effective to share it. But I just want to clarify, what's proposed is to not actually revisit any of the business license bylaw changes. I think we would continue with those as they are and find a zoning approach to work with that.
Well, I'm not really clear on that, because a lot of what's in your report does talk about things that are in the business licensing bylaw that had 2 readings to it. So it talks about whether we're going to be moving forward with whole houses or just suites. It seems to be a lot more to your report that you're proposing reviewing than just the zoning. If it's just the zoning, then
yeah, we are not proposing any changes to the business license bylaw at this point. That's not what the intent was of this report.
Okay, so if we go back to your report then, if I can just get the timeline out. Thank you. So the online survey, stakeholder meetings, public open house would just be to talk about which zones of the community we want to put these in?
Exactly, zoning and the zones and the zoning regulations.
Okay, council? So I think personally, I would rather just hear your recommendation on which zones we think these should be in if we're not going to revisit the bylaw piece of it. Councillor Haggard.
First of all, I want to thank you. Both of you put a lot of work and effort into this report, and I really appreciate the information. My only concern about the timeline is I just don't want the planning department to get bogged down on this issue when you have so much on your plate already and so many new developments coming into our community. So that's my only concern about going through this entire process. So if there's any way that we can maybe like shorten it down and get right to the nitty gritty sooner rather than later, so that way your department is focused on this instead of other more important things.
Okay, I'm going to make a motion that we just ask the planner for recommendations on proposed zoning. Okay, is there a seconder? Okay, any further conversation?
Just
Councillor Paulson.
the report was so good and in depth, and I'm kind of feeling that we're ready to move to that stage, to be quite honest. The report was very thorough. Yeah, I'm ready to hear that, actually. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, seeing no other comments being made. Okay, on the question, all in favor? Carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, if I may, I think this is the last time we'll see Seamus. He's done some very good work for us on behalf of VIU. And if council has any feedback for Seamus, I'm sure he would appreciate that, and any thanks you want to offer.
Okay. Any comments for Seamus? I'll just start by saying thank you, and that was a very good presentation you made. Yeah, and we're possibly get to work with you again in the future. Thank you very much.
Resume when you graduate.
Thank you. Okay, on to bylaws. Number 1, from the Acting Director of Finance, we have the 2020 to 2024 5-year financial plan, the first reading. And there is a summary report there. I'll just get who would like to just briefly speak to, maybe the Deputy City Clerk, just so that everyone understands in the public what a first reading means. Because I know there was some misinformation on social media I've caught already today.
Okay, definitely, Madam Mayor. So just for council's benefit and the public in general, first reading is essentially the time where council is introduced formally to the bylaw. It acts as, just as I said, a formal introduction to council and members of the public. And it has staff assign a formal number to the bylaw for reference. At this stage, there is not intended to be any discussion of the bylaw. It's generally there for you to receive, table, and you'll make your considerations moving forward.
Okay, so this is a bit of a different process than we've done in the past. This is how the regional district does do their budget process as well, where they give first reading before they have their in-depth meetings, and then they make changes as they go. So just wanted to make sure everyone understood that. Councillor Poon, would you like to read this one?
I'll move that 5-year financial bylaw 2020-2024, bylaw number 5003, be now introduced and read a first time.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Okay, any comments? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And on to correspondence for action. Item number 1 is an email dated December 17th, 2019, requesting council reopen the 2020 Community Investment Program application process. Councillor, are there any comments or questions on this? Councillor Corbeil.
Yeah, I have a question, I guess. The Toy Run Society asked for the ability to use Glenwood Center and a few things like that. Does that actually have to go through the community investment program? Is that not something they can just ask for? And I, for one, certainly think they do a fantastic job, and I would have no problem with letting them use anything that they need in regards to the toy run.
Yeah. And I think that certainly the community investment program is the best place for these applications. I do think, though, that we know as well that Portal Players was they missed the deadline this year, and I think that these are two examples of groups in our community that do really good work, that continually do meet the deadline. I'm not sure we want to reopen the process, but it might be worth just asking our staff to work with those two applications specifically outside of the community investment program to see if we can accommodate their needs. I don't think we would want to. I think the work that the Toy Run and Portal Players do in our community is really important work. And I think if we can accommodate them, there might be another way outside of the program. Thank you. Councillor Poon?
Thanks. I agree that we should not reopen the process, but I think that, yes, we should work with them to make it work, and because they do support our economy quite well.
For sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Washington?
Thank you. I agree too that we can't reopen the program, but if we could get Director Thorpe to maybe give us a dollar figure at the next meeting, how much this is worth. I know, salmon festively speaking, that we do have to submit in order just to get the tents. Mm-hmm. But having said that, the tents come in, city staff sets up the tent, city staff come down and take the tents down, so there is a cost involved in it, but what they do is unreal. They even, they support even my Our Town program, so
Yeah.
no, I'd like to see us try and help them out, but I really don't want to open it back up again, because that goes against everything we work for, so.
Yeah, and it could be, there might be a way for us to fund these two initiatives through contingency or another means. So, Councillor Haggard?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If you're applying for a provincial or federal grant and the deadline is 4:30 p.m. on a Friday, January 15th, if your application comes in at 4:32 p.m., you're not eligible for that grant. So I think these groups have to take this processes more seriously, especially when they were sent reminders about the deadline. They did know, and it's something they do every year, so they knew it was in the process. However, with that being said, the Port Alberni Toy Run does an incredible amount of good work for our community, and I don't want to say no, but I want to ensure that this is a one-time exception, and we appreciate the work that they do, but follow the processes that we set.
Yeah, I really agree with you. We want to make sure our processes are followed. I think the difference this year is that we typically do leave funds left over for late applications. So we have somewhat set that precedent in the past, and this year we changed that. And I don't know if the groups may have been made aware that we weren't doing that, but I know as a council, I wasn't aware we weren't doing that this year. So groups may not have been as careful with their deadlines because there's always been that extra bit of funding left for late applications. So I think this would be, we could make this the last year that we are more lenient with that deadline, and then going forward be firmer. But I just would hate to see, Toy Run displaced. Director Thorpe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to be clear, in reference to deadlines, the buffer of funds that was kept on account in previous years was actually earmarked only for new events. So both Portal Players and the Toy Run that you're speaking to at this time, under this time last year, so the last cycle of funds, actually both would be declined under that same criteria. So just so we're all clear, and for public's benefit as well, existing or returning events such as Toy Run and Portal Players wouldn't actually be eligible for that buffer of extra funds.
Okay, thank you. Okay, are there any more questions or comments? Councillor Paulson.
The letter that the Port Alberni Toy Run was extremely compelling and actually backed with facts and figures. I've been involved in a number of volunteer organizations and groups, and I do know that you're only as good as your volunteers are, and that these things happen. I think that we know that this isn't the last time something like this will come before council. We probably need to, I don't know, have a criteria. Either we take the hard nose and say, look at, this is the rule, apply next year. In the case of the toy run here, there was no cash ask in theirs. It's really in-kind services, which would be, I know there's a cash value attached to each of these, but I really sincerely hope that there's a way that we can work around to help them get to yes, because I know that we more than receive in return anything that we put into the community investment program for the toy run. They put more into the community than they receive from us. So I'm sympathetic with the volunteer situation where you may have a change in treasurers or whoever is responsible for doing these sorts of things. I don't know if this is the case, but it does happen.
For sure.
And we have to be prepared. It's maybe not be the toy run next year, but somebody else is going to come and say, jeepers creepers, like, give me a break. But anyway, I hope that we can work around this some way.
Okay, so I will make a motion that we receive this email and that we direct staff to work with the toy run and portal players to see if we can accommodate their 2019 requests, 2020? What year is it? Their 2020 requests. Thank you. Okay, and any further comments? And Councillor Paulson adds with a reprimand.
What was the request from Portal Players? Do we know?
I believe it was for utilities, but I would have to defer to staff, and that could be brought back. We don't need to make a decision on it today. Okay. Any further comments? Okay, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. And item 2, from the business owners in the fitness industry and city services, a letter dated December 1st from local business owners in the fitness industry requesting the city's Parks, Recreation and Heritage Department consider providing fitness programs that do not duplicate those offered by the private sector. So just a bit of background on this, update on this, that myself and I believe the CAO and Director Thorpe have a meeting set up with a couple of these businesses just to hear their concerns and see if there's any opportunities or areas that we should be looking at changes potentially. So with that said, Councillor Corbeil, would you like to move that we receive this letter?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I move that the letter dated December 1st, 2019, requesting that the city's Parks, Recreation and Heritage Department consider providing fitness programs that do not duplicate those offered by private business be received. Note, a meeting has been scheduled with the letter writer and the city representatives to discuss this request.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
I'll second that, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Any further comments? Councillor Paulson.
Just historically, this isn't the first time this has come before council. I recall, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, 11 years ago, the same discussion, and I know there was meetings with Parks and Recreation and the operators, and there seemed to be some sort of mutual trust or agreement that came, and maybe there's something where we strayed off the path or whatever, but I hope that your meeting works out well with them, and I like your gym and stuff at the pool. So.
Yes, and we will provide an update after that meeting just to let council know how that went. Okay, on that, no comments? All in favor? Carried.
Sound like an old guy, huh? You never win.
And item 3 from Jessica Philpott, Republic Safety and Security and Parking. We have a letter received December 12th, 2019, requesting residential parking allocation on Argyle Street next to the Power of 3. Are there any questions on this one? Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I can sympathize with Ms. Philpott, but coming here today, I noticed that the parking restriction is only from 9 a.m. till 6 p.m. So technically, she should be able to park in front of her business after 6 when it's dark, when she's worried about it the most. And also being a business owner up there, I don't think I'd want my staff or anybody parking in front of my business during the day when you need that space for customers. So just a comment. Thank you.
For sure. And I think in the future we might want to consider some kind of, like if there are areas close to the uptown street parking where it could be permit only for uptown merchants or business owners. Sections of street that aren't as heavily used for parking, but I certainly agree that, Argyle and Third is not the location. But there might be an opportunity in the future. I had someone at an Uptown Merchants meeting suggest a certain section of Argyle that could potentially work, so it might be something to discuss. Councillor Poon.
Sorry. I like the idea that, people are taking an interest in living in Uptown, and I do want to encourage something like this to happen, but I do not think that the residential parking zone should be available for all hours of the day. I think that it should be, after 5 or after 6 kind of timing. And yeah, I think we should encourage more people to live in Uptown. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay. Councillor Hegard.
Instead of having a dedicated parking spot, can we maybe give her and the other resident a parking pass so that they can park on the street without getting ticketed on certain hours? Because even though it's 9 to 6, at 4:30, it's dark out these days.
I think that's a bigger conversation around, do we want people who live there to be able to park there all day long, and potentially take parking away from businesses in a commercial zone. So if council wants to do that, we certainly can develop a program like that. But I think we have to be clear in understanding what we are likely taking away then.
At this point in time, parking is not finding parking on 3rd Avenue and Argyle is not a huge concern at the present time. It may be at some point in the future. Usually now you can find parking within a block or so.
I don't know about that.
Every time I go uptown, I'm always within a block.
Yeah. But if we allow people who live there to park there all day long, or like we've had requests from, we have to think about what that might open up as well, because we've had requests from business owners who want their staff to be able to park right in front of their businesses for safety concerns, which, may be legitimate, but then where do the customers park and what does that do to the other businesses? It's been a big topic of conversation among some of the businesses that have varying opinions on it. I think if we're going to consider any changes, we might want to discuss with the Uptown Merchants group first.
Can we maybe give her a temporary pass till this matter gets resolved? Because, single mothers with young children is a huge concern to me. Until we get it resolved, give her a 3 months pass, which will then take us into where it gets dark out later on in the evening and won't be so much as a concern then. Do it temporary.
I think if there's a willingness among council, we can, but we don't have a parking pass program right now, I don't think. You can make a motion if you would like to.
I'd like to make a motion that we talk to bylaw and see if they can issue a temporary pass to these 2 residents for a term of 3 months and revisit it at that time.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Poon.
I would rather see us do the whole process in one shot rather than having temporary passes.
Councillor Washington.
Well, just doing a little bit of math here. If 2-hour parking's from 9 till 6, she can technically be there till 11 o'clock and park there at 4 o'clock when it's still light and not be breaking any laws.
Yeah, I agree. I can sympathize with this, but I think it sets a really dangerous precedent that we'll get business owners asking for parking passes for their staff, and I think the risk of this is large, and we probably won't just be one person. And I do think that section, specifically that one block of 3rd Avenue, is difficult for parking as it is, and we hear that from business owners. And I think if we're going to do something that will impact that, we need to not do it on a one-off basis, but have a larger conversation and make sure the businesses are consulted.
Isn't her ask for Argyle Street, not 3rd? on Argyle Street, where on that little strip, there's no businesses open at the present time on her side of the
I thought
street.
it's at Third.
I think it's the Argyle side.
Okay.
It's just south of Third, or west of Third.
Okay.
So there's the coffee shop that's there. Right?
Yep, coffee shop. There's a, it's sold and it's opening back up. So there's the coffee shop and there's a consignment store and there's a deli opening.
Yeah. Consignment store is further down though.
Yeah. And then there's Power of Three, which I would argue takes up a lot of that parking a lot of the time. So we have a motion for a parking pass. Are there any further comments? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Defeated. Would somebody like to move receipt of the letter?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
And any further comments on the letter? Okay, Councillor Paulson?
I sympathize with the previous comments by Councillor. I have a hard time with the ticketing at this point in time, but I don't know how we get around that. Just till we have a proper policy here with regards to that area. But really, they could park there, with the exception of about 6 hours through the full 24-hour day.
Yeah. So somebody can't park there all day long if they're going to be at home all day long, but they can park there during daylight hours. They can, if they don't have to park at night, and they can be there at 4 p.m. on. So I think that takes away a lot of the safety concern. And the intent of those spaces is not to be used for all-day parking. Okay. On receipt of the letter, all in favor? Carried. Correspondence for information. City Clerk.
Yes, Madam Mayor. So your first item is from Premier Horgan, and he's simply expressing the importance of government-to-government meetings and his appreciation for the joint meeting with Hawaiian First Nation. The first meeting of the ministry's action group that was held in November, and that's relating to the Bamfield road safety issues. And then also tasking MLA Scott Fraser with looking at possibilities of improving or making sure there's cell phone coverage and 911 service out in that road. The second item is from the Honorable Selena Robinson, and it's essentially just a wrap-up of the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing about their accomplishments and funding initiatives over the past year. You have correspondence from Stepping Stones Childcare, and they're thanking Council for their permissive tax exemption as it relates to the Alberni Valley Childcare Society and the Kiwanis Hilton Children's Center. Another thank you letter from students and staff at St. John Paul II Catholic School. Again, thanking City and the Advisory Traffic Committee for the safety improvements, crosswalk and signage at the corner of Maitland and 8th Avenue. Correspondence from the Alberni Valley Transition Town Society inviting City Council Liaison, who is Councillor Poon, to their regular public meetings, and encouraging City to dedicate staff and budget resources to create an environmental review and management capacity, and that they look forward to future partnerships with the City. And then finally, correspondence from Daniel Prasad, and he's encouraging Council to consider waiving property taxes for senior citizens.
Thank you. Are there any items Council would like to speak to? Okay, I'll just provide an update on item 1, the letter from Premier Horgan, because he does mention improved cell phone coverage on the road to Bamfield. We have been told that that is next to impossible to get cell reception on the road to Bamfield as of our last update. But the Ministry of Transportation has or is working on putting in emergency call boxes, and they said that they feel they can fund that through their current budget, and they're looking to try to get that work done as soon as possible. So I was surprised to see cell phone coverage mentioned here, because our last update that we received at the regional district was that that is impossible. But there is progress being made, and I know that Huayet and the regional district are continuing meetings with the province on the Bamfield Road and safety improvements. Okay, any other items, Councillor Paulson?
With regards to letter number 6 from Mr. Prasad, and I'm looking at there's 2 tax notices there. There's tax on his property, and his actual taxes are $4,510, which I think is really high. But he's put in a similarly priced property. His assessment was $590. The similarly priced property was of $514.9, and the taxes for that second property were almost half. I'm just kind of wondering where the equity is
Well,
on those 2 tax
yeah.
bills.
So
And
it's BC assessment. The assessed value of that second home is significantly less, whether it's actually worth that or not.
Okay,
but
so this is a real estate listing. Okay.
yeah, so this second one is a real estate listing, and it's just showing what the taxes are.
Yeah.
But the assessed value of that home that they're trying to sell for
Probably
$500,000 is probably $300.
Yeah.
And so
Okay.
that's a disparity in when we had BC assessment here, and we were talking to them about trying to bring their assessments more in line with what houses were selling for. This is a really good example of that. That second house is probably paying significantly less in taxes than they should be based on what presumably it will sell for. So I think that's not an issue for us. It's an issue for
Yeah.
BC assessment.
I missed the MLS part up there.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Any other comments? Okay. Councillor Paulson, would you like to move receipt of the correspondence? Thank you. Is there a seconder? Okay. And all in favor? Carried. And council reports, any items people would like to discuss? Okay. I'll just provide an update that what consumed the most of my last week was our meetings that myself and Councillor Haggard have been having with hotel owners in the community. We decided to reach out to hotel owners and set up an opportunity to meet because we have tourism as such a high focus and small business in our strategic plan. So we thought before any initiatives are started that it would be important to sit down with the people in our community who are operating these tourism related businesses and just get an opportunity to hear from them what they see as the opportunities and the challenges of doing business in our community. We're starting to see a lot of common themes. So once we meet with all of them, we will be putting together a report on kind of what we're hearing. We're taking extensive notes as we go. So there's some real opportunities and some great ideas that have come forward through that. So they've been really positive meetings.
Can I
Councillor
just
Haggard?
add to that?
Yes.
I just want to add that we heard some really wonderful creative ideas for this community, and I hope we're going to be able to implement some of those ideas. They were just wonderful, and it was so great to reach out and meet these people, and they were quite honored to be called to the mayor's office
Yes, they
for
were.
that discussion.
For sure. Okay.
I was hoping we could maybe talk about later on other industries that we could reach out to.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's a great initiative. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a reminder that the Film Fest for the winter has started. Movies will be on January 19th, February 23rd, March 29th, and April 19th. Your tickets, single series, $15 in the past for all of them would be $55. And Shelley Harding has reported that since the reduction of seating at the theater, these events are selling out rather quickly because instead of 400 seats, you've got 170-something seats. So all the tickets will be available through the museum, but a worthwhile thing, and it keeps our museum going. So thank you.
Great. Wonderful. Okay. Seeing nothing else, Councillor Haggard, could you move receipt of the reports?
I move that the council reports outlining recent meetings and events related to the city's business be received.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Okay. All in favor? Carried. Are there any new business items to bring forward from councillors? Councillor Corbeil.
Yes, Madam Mayor. Recently, we had a discussion talking about vacant properties, and it became somewhat apparent that some of the bylaws potentially are obsolete or could be better written. So I'm asking that council consider appointing a select committee to review and prioritize bylaws that better align with our strategic plan.
Perfect. So let's make that a notice of motion for, that could be on the agenda for our next council meeting so that we can have an opportunity to, council has full warning and we can have an opportunity to look up ideas and discuss from there. Okay, thank you. Question period. Do any members of the public have questions? There are two back there, so. Come on forward, yes.
As you know, ACOS is all about safety and security for women and kids. And as you also know, the area on 3rd Avenue in Argyle where we're speaking about the parking request is certainly in an area of higher risk. And I'm completely sympathetic and understanding of the request being made by the two residents. And I'm conflicted because there is an urge to bring more people to the uptown area and to live there, and it's going to be a housing issue for more than just two people, and it will multiply. So I would suggest, as a possible alternative, right now, Uptown Merchants did work with the city on the possibility of extended length parking passes for clients that would extend the ability to park on the street for 4 hours, that perhaps if Power of Three is wishing to assign those passes to the people that are residing above, then they may want to consider that. That might take care of the part of the problem. There is a cost associated with this. But again, I think there was a limit of 2 per business. So I would suggest that could be a possible alternative in the interim. But I do want to say that I certainly would express concern for women living in the neighborhood who have young children. So it is a concern for me also. So just, yeah.
Thank you.
Great tweet, by the way, Alan.
You wear it well, and I'm going to note that you're the only one in the work home. I'm taking pictures of you.
It's a black.
All right, so if seeing no other questions, would somebody like to move adjournment?
So move, Madam Mayor.
Okay, all in favor? Carried.